Hey everybody, welcome to today's Agent Gateway meeting. I'm going to try to share my screen, but may not work. I've been having trouble with screen sharing unless I share my entire screen. I do have a topic I want to bring up, but I want to ask if anybody else have any topic they want to bring up first. And if you can, just hop on the notes section, put your name. We would appreciate that. I saw somebody added a roadmap discussion on semantic tool search as MCP tool. Is it any of you added, or maybe the person didn't say the name? So it's all right. I didn't hear anything. Suri, do you have any topic? Oh, you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Still writing a write up on getting some help on the agent gateway, but I've been worked on other priorities, but I'll get back to it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, John, do you want to give a quick update on some of the new stuff going on the development side of Agent Gateway before we jump into the open question I put in there?
Sure. No, we just did another release yesterday. I forget what's been in it since last week. Let me see. So we talked about the big MCP proxy changes. We just got support for Azure authentication, so you can use Azure OpenAI. Useful for some people. That's it so far, really. There hasn't been that much, but there's been some big work that hasn't landed yet around the LN consumption side, basically trying to support the Anthropic API, so you can use like Claude Code. And then also supporting, like we do use the OpenAI API, but everyone else using the OpenAI API adds additional fields onto it to do things like reasoning and other things that OpenAI doesn't do. And so we're also going to support those fields as well, so you don't get a degraded experience even for OpenAI compatible things. So those are both in progress, but should be pretty exciting, hopefully.
That's great. So the OpenAI, we still only support OpenAI compatible, but it's a nicer experience for the user, I assume.
Yeah, so basically before, if a provider returned fields that are not exposed in OpenAI's native API, then we just dropped them. And so if you had like a reasoning model, for example, most non-OpenAI models return the actual reasoning content, so you can like see what it was thinking or whatever. But OpenAI doesn't, so there's just no field for it, so you can't see it. So we just allow you to pass through additional fields from the provider, essentially, in the request and in the response.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Thanks for the development update. Okay, I don't see anybody added any topic. I would love to jump into my topic then. So effectively, I've been writing a book on AI agents in Kubernetes. And as that part of the book, we are featuring an example of AI reliability agent. And then as part of that agent, I need a runtime. So we use K-agent as the runtime, but you don't have to. Effectively, I'm deploying the MCP agent gateway as the MCP gateway for my tools. So I'm using some of the building tools from Kubernetes as part of a K-agent, and I'm also using the GitHub MCP tools. So one of the challenges I run into is the moment I configure Agent Gateway to do multiplexing to multiple MCP server, I think Agent Gateway put a prefix based on the backend, the MCP backend. I config Agent Gateway in the Agent Gateway configuration. So if I put GitHub, Agent Gateway would put GitHub prefix to all of my GitHub tools. If I put Google Slides, and then it would put a Google Slides prefix to all of my Google Slides tools. So the discussion I want to raise up to the team is, unfortunately, this is not a great experience for people who is building agents using these MCP tools when it's accessing through Agent Gateway, because for once, first of all, I would have to, the moment I have Agent Gateway in, especially when it has multiplex in, basically agent could be broken because it was linking to the tools without the prefix. But now with the prefix added by Agent Gateway, effectively as a user, I would have to kind of go back to my agent YAML or agent definition that's specify what tool to use to kind of adjust that accordingly. So my initial intuition is it would be nice if we don't have to break people, but then on the other hand is, what if there's duplicate tool names from different MCP server? How do we handle that? Wouldn't that cause confusing? In my simple scenario, I only have 2 MCP servers, so it's actually, there was no conflict. So I want to open up for discussion on what we can do in this case. One possible way is just add all the prefix, regardless whether you have 1 MCP or 2 MCP or multiple MCP. The other possible solution I can see is maybe just don't do prefix, but alert user, give user option to opt in for prefix, and alert to the gateway can somehow alert to the user when there's a conflict, and they ignore that the conflict. The second one, conflict wouldn't be, that tool wouldn't be available until it's fixed. So I want to open up for discussions on this topic.
I think we should just go for a prefix, and that's it. That's the easiest, the simplest way. There's nothing we can warn the users about from the gateway. Right. There's the only thing that you can warn them if there's the equivalent tool name, right? If the tool name is the same. But other than that, like, I think that would be, if we can guarantee a unique tool name across all the MCP server tools in your agent gateway, that's all that we can do, I think, on the agent gateway. And that's enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. This reminds me, I think some gateway provide like a rewrite of the name for pass, right? So that the application doesn't have to change to work with the new pass. I wonder if we can do something. I just feel, I understand adding prefix is nice, but I almost hate user have to go to every single of their agent to update that the moment they add agent gateway into the picture.
Who would have to? No one would have to update it. What do you mean?
Well, because before, when I'm not using Agent Gateway, there's no prefix, which I'm using like search code, right, as one of the tool from GitHub. Now, the moment I add Agent Gateway, regardless of whether I have 1 MCP server or multiple MCP server, if we always do the prefix, I'm having a breakage on my agent that I have to go back to modify my agent, which I don't really like that.
But if we add the same prefix, regardless if you're multiplexing or not, then we're not breaking anyone, right?
You are still breaking
No. If you're putting it before, like, let's say you've never used Agent Gateway,
yeah,
and you want to just put Agent Gateway into the
Agent
picture.
Gateway is 0.90 version, right?
What?
No,
No, but
I'm saying like you don't use the Agent Gateway in your agent framework. Imagine my agent talk directly to MCP, so I'm doing the dumbest thing. I don't have any governance security. And then I learned about, I need to use the MCP gateway, and I'm using agent gateway to serve that. Boom, all my agents are broken because all the linkage to the tools now require a prefix. So I hate that user experience. I think John had a hand on for a while, so.
I think honestly, the thing, in my opinion, and I'm happy to be wrong. Yeah, hey, John, sorry. No matter what, we shouldn't wobble. So I have no issue either way, but I think we shouldn't wobble. I think that the real problematic behavior, Lynn, is that because your thing switched from one to the other, and that was very confusing. John, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say one thing I realized, and I said we could remove the prefix, but it would be very, very challenging because we actually use the prefix to identify which server to call when they call the tool.
Mm.
And so, sure, we could attempt to be stateful and like remember the list tools response, but I think we're trying to be less stateful, not more stateful. So that might be counter to that. So that would lean towards what Acon said, which is always adding the prefix. Or we could have a mode that says always add prefix for a single MCP server.
Oh yeah, that I do want that to happen regardless.
Yeah, but
So-
but what I'm saying is we can't add a mode to remove the prefix from multiple. That's problematic.
Okay, yeah, I got you on the implementation side. I also agree if we decide to add the prefix, do it for the single too, so that when I transition from single to multiple, at least I don't have to make change again. Keith, I saw you went off camera.
But
Yeah, so just a quick question on this. We need namespacing for federation, but could we not instrument a mode where a client on a given route, we can as long as there's not a duplicate tool name that exposed to a route, the client could address that route with just the base tool name. We could still have the metadata from federation internally to know that it's namespaced, but basically allow a non-namespace addressal through the route. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but then Keith, we need to know I got a tool foo, which server does it go to?
No, but I think you still have that information, John, because internally we actually, our registry, like we've namespaced it internally. I'm saying that like when the client does a discovery, maybe there's a configuration flag that says strip namespace off. And as long as there's no overlap internally, we know if it's doing tool A, that's server B, basically, because there's no overlap, in other words. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we'd have to maintain state on the connection and like of the tools they listed, and then
Okay.
which we could do. We could do for sure. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
well suited right now, and I think it may mess up some of our future plans around session management and things.
Okay.
The other wrinkle here is that technically these MCP servers can add tools at any time. Like you could be subscribed to an MCP server that adds a tool. Like on your next list tools request, it just decides to add a tool that happens to clash with another server.
But that's actually like that's one of those features and bugs at the same time, right? Like that's actually
Yeah.
something we want to protect against because that's how you can get like rug pulled, right? Or have like masquerading attacks of injecting look safe and then they're like, oh, by the way, this is your bank account tool that my my private MCP server is exposing.
Yeah, I know.
so yeah, just one thing that I wanted to add and or ask is going back to that scenario, right? Like let's say I'm using K-Agent, I'm using the MCP server directly, right? I have the tools. If I move to Agent Gateway,
Yeah.
I'm not connecting to that MCP server directly anymore anyway. I'll have to create a new connection to the Agent Gateway, right?
That's a one-time configuration, right? So I create a pointer to say, this is my remote MCP server. I want to make my agents to use. So that's one-time configuration, which is
But you'll have to modify the agent, right? To use
well,
that.
you don't need to modify the agent. You need to modify the framework to say, I want you to discover tools from this MCP server.
No,
I see
No,
what Peter's
no,
saying
but
though, Lynn.
like
Like
in YAML, right? In YAML, if I add GitHub MCP server, right, I'll have to reference it as GitHub MCP server. Here's my tool names, right? Then if you add Agent Gateway separately and you connect MCP server as a backend to that Agent Gateway, you'll have to create another resource that's called my agent gateway MCP server.
Oh
And
yeah,
then-
you do, because you have to. It used to be maybe an MCP server. Now you may need to change to remote MCP server. The name might be different. If
yeah,
that's
so
what
you
you're
have to
referring
modify your agent.
You do, yeah, but
In
not
that
tools.
case, you have to modify the tools as well because the tools
Okay.
are theoretically different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see how we can do this automatically for users. I really don't. Because another thing that we could say is, oh, now that I want to use Agent Gateway, it should just automatically update all of my agents to point to that Agent Gateway for all the MCP tools. We can't do that reliably, right? You know what I mean? You already
know
have
exactly
to
what
modify
you
the
mean,
agent,
yes.
right?
It's like you not only need to update the pointer, on top of that, you have to go through each of the tool to add the prefix.
because we don't know if they're the same or not, right? Like you know that they're the same, right? You might know that they're the same, but we from the product platform framework perspective, we cannot say whether they're the same or not, right? Because in one case, I'm accessing GitHub directly, GitHub
Yeah.
MCP, and the second one, I'm going to some Agent Gateway API, like a URL, right? I don't know that those two are the same, right? I personally don't see it as a big deal necessarily, this going back and updating the thing. We just have to make sure that like users are aware, right?
Yeah, I think it's not a big deal for one or two agent. If as long as there is a nice way to debug it, what hits us and myself is it took us a few hours to debug it, right? So that's not ideal. Hopefully, if this is clear, all user needs to do is just figure out how to update for their 100 agents if they have that many.
Yeah, but there'll have to be some, I hate to call it migration process, right? But there is a migration, right? Because you will have an MCP server that you were directly referencing, and then you will have your agent gateway that's fronting that same MCP server. So you will have to move your agents from this one to that one. So there will be some migration there. And at some point, you'll delete the reference to that server, right?
Yeah, actually, that migration you were just talking about can be avoided. I was actually just doing this on my system because what I can do is so in my environment, like I deploy GitHub MCP server in the MCP namespace. And because right now K-Agent doesn't support calling MCP server from a different namespace. So what I ends up is when I have my agent in the K-Agent namespace, I actually created a remote MCP server to point to that MCP server in the MCP server namespace. So what I could do, if without worry about the prefix, is I update my remote MCP server to point to the agent gateway, and that would be totally transparent to any of the agents if the tool name doesn't change. In your case, you would need to add a reference, but if I'm doing this intermediate remote MCP server, then I don't need to update the agent if the prefix doesn't change.
Well, that's assuming the name of your MCP server resource is the same, right?
Yeah, assuming you just update your old one and point to agent gateway. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now because that limitation we had on K-Agent, we don't support cross namespace. So you
I
have
think
to
we're
use
getting,
this
hold on,
pointer.
let's take a step back. I think we're getting a little like caught on the minutia of like Caden and the interaction there. I think let's like, what are the use cases that we want to accomplish, right? What are the dangers, right? So Lynn, I think you specifically mentioned, I think, let's just say that if you're trying to transition, right, a server onto Agent Gateway, then there will always only be one set of backends, always, right? Because you're transitioning what was a single MCP server into Agent Gateway, right? So the reason that the code exists as it does today is because a single MCP server is stable, naming is stable, right? But if you want a multiplex, naming is unstable, right? And so that is where it becomes difficult. So something that you've all mentioned to me, and I don't think is a terrible idea, is we could basically have a mode in Agent Gateway that says this is a single MCP backend. It is a single MCP backend. It will always be a single MCP backend. And what that means is we don't need any kind of namespacing. It can remain the same, right? And what
You
that
mean
would allow us.
prefix? We don't need a
What?
prefix. You mean we
You-
don't need a prefix?
Sorry, that's what I mean by namespace. Yes, you won't need a prefix. And because you don't have and so that could be a good option if you specifically don't want to do this prefixing, right? And however, when you want to explicitly move to a multiplexed or prefixed option, then it's a different backend, basically, that is a multi MCP backend. So I don't know that that's like I think
Yeah.
it's worth thinking about something like that.
But I think I would prefer one and multiple MCP server to be consistent. By the way, what I was describing is Agent Gateway as an MCP gateway. Think about Agent Gateway as a waypoint. It needs to be transparent to the user. So in that scenario, it's harder to control how many backend you may have deployed in your namespace. So we have to think through that too.
But we can't do both, Lynn. Like we cannot not have the prefix and be passed through. So we need to decide how we, like we just need to decide, is there a middle ground we can reach? Because
Yeah.
we can't do both.
I hear you. I would prefer if we do prefix, just always have the prefix.
Okay,
I-
then let's do that.
I think that will be a rough experience for the people that are just slapping Agent Gateway in front of one server. Like multiplexing is an advanced case you opt into. That is not necessarily even something maybe you might not want to do.
But do you think the most common scenario people actually ends up to using Agent Gateway would be multiplexing though?
Maybe.
Sorry, I saw you turn off camera. What do you think?
Yeah, I think my challenge, I guess, with multiplexing is you are exposing more tools to one agent. Agents or LLMs have limitations on how many tools they can fit into the context, and there are actual tool limitations. So I don't know if that's the same problem space you're talking about. In some cases, we're actually implementing semantic search before we give the tools to the agent, like LangGraph, Big Tool, or other semantic search. So I don't know if multiplexing, if that's in the same context we're talking about, but I feel like that would be the anti-pattern for giving less context to the LLM.
It's always the end user who decides what gets attached, right, to the LLM, if that makes sense, right? It's not it doesn't matter if you're doing multiplexing or not. It's more it's the in the agent you will pick the tools that you want to include, and only those tools will be sent to the LLM.
Right. I think typically, like today, in many cases, you are doing list tools and you're attaching those list tools, but there are obviously, you can do that. Let's say if you have a domain specific agent for GitHub and you are doing all the list tools and you're attaching to that agent, versus based on the user query, you only select X number of tools or 3 tools, and then you send that to the LLM. So your context is smaller. So I think there are APIs or MCP servers that have thousands and thousands of tools. That's where it gets easier. But I guess what my question is, when you're talking about multiplexing, you're multiplexing unrelated MCP servers into like a single endpoint, right? Where you're showcasing all you're exporting all the MCP tools into one.
Yes.
Basically, the diagram you shared last week, right? You have Agent Gateway as one MCP gateway, and behind of the Agent Gateway, there's multiple MCP servers. I think that's a pretty common scenario when people actually take Agent Gateway to production. Maybe not get started, I would say. But I hear, John, your point about you don't want to break people early too. So yeah.
John, what is your concern with adding the prefix if there's only a single like MCP backend?
It's just kind of like I go and deploy, and the hello world use case, and suddenly my tool name is messed up, right?
Yeah.
Or even worse, like for a waypoint use case, it's kind of supposed to be transparent, right? I transparently stick it in there, and all of a sudden the behavior's changed. Like, I don't mind adding a flag to add it or something.
Yeah.
I just don't know that's a great default.
So what if, Don, what if when it's disabled, you're only allowed one backend? Like, what if,
Yeah.
how about that?
You can only turn it off if there's one backend.
That, I think we should, what about that? We have basically a config, like a knack, where if
I
you
do the
try-
opposite, Aton. Sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, if we make it opt in, then the flag is just always prefix.
Sure. Yeah. No, I don't. I have no feeling about how opt-in, whatever. But like, just basically so that you can only, if the prefixes are off, you can only have one backend, basically.
Oh, then you have to explicitly opt in to have multiple backends.
Eesh.
Yeah, I don't like that either. I think the default should be as simple as possible, which might be our behavior today.
But Lynn, what the problem is, you keep saying the default should be as simple as possible, but other people think that the default should be the other use case. So we have to decide which is the primary use case.
Well, the challenge is there is a primary user case for production. There is a primary user case for get started, which is that you just use one single MCP server behind your gateway. That's the challenging. So.
Yeah.
I wouldn't optimize for getting started necessarily, but I don't know.
I mean, my 2 cents, which is not a lot, but I'm just a user.
No, please.
If I was doing the get started, I would probably be comfortable with having to set a flag by default by going to a single, but the default is add the prefixing. And it's like, well, I'm only doing a local getting started, so I'll opt out the prefixing. But by default, it's on. I wouldn't have a problem with that as a user.
Okay, so the default would be optimized for the prefix always, but then there's a simple get started.
I was going to say the exact same thing. It's easy enough to add a flag to our get quick start instructions, like a dash, remove prefix. If we feel like that's a better UX, it's still going to be the same number of commands to run, but I think optimizing for production is the play.
Yeah, maybe we can slice both here, which is just in the getting started guide. I agree with Lynn that it's probably when you're kicking the tires for the first time, you're probably starting with a single tool server, right? Like, I mean, at least in my own experience working with these projects, like I try to start as simple as possible first and then start to expand my usage, right?
Yeah.
So if the get started guide just said, if it just optimized for that case, which is, by the way, you were going to apply this flag, which means you're interacting with a single tool server. If you're using multiple tool servers already, don't do this, basically, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I go from there to then multiple servers? I'll have to reinstall.
Is it a global setting or would it be per?
It'd be per backend.
It would be per backend. So I could theoretically have a backend without a prefix and then add another backend without a prefix with a flag, and then another backend with a automatic prefix.
Well, that seems like validation should catch that, right? Like if you come in and do that, but does it belong on a backend or does it belong on a route?
I mean, it's in the configuration, right? I don't. Let me look at that.
Yeah, maybe we need to think a little bit more because the agent gateway can run by itself also in K gateway too. So yeah, I know John and I have to go to a Istio meeting too. So should we think a little bit more and reconvene next week then?
Great follow-up talk. I love teasing the next meeting, and we'll have this settled by then, right?
Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for the great discussion today.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.
See ya.